Hey everybody, how's everyone doing tonight? Welcome to the live stream. Let me just, I think the music is a bit loud. Okay, I think that's better. Cool, so welcome to tonight's stream. Tonight we're going to do some physics in Blender, as you can see by the thumbnail and the title. So I was thinking of building something like a castle tower or something and then breaking it using some physics simulations. So let's see how that goes. So I'm just going to jump straight into Blender. And yeah, just let me know in the comments if there's any issues with audio, but I think everything is looking good. Bitrate's looking good, no dropping frames or no dropped frames. That's all good. So yeah, let me know in the comments if you have any questions or if you have any suggestions. So as you can see, I've got a little reference image loaded here on the side. And this is just kind of a reference that I want to do, just like a basic little tower, like a castle type of tower thing, and then we break it with physics. So if you guys want to follow along, make sure you have the self fracture plugin installed. And basically, if you go to edit and preferences, I don't think my preferences window is going to show, but literally in the add-ons section, you just search for the word cell, CELL, and you'll see object self fracture, and you can just enable that, and that's going to give you access to the fracture plugin. Before we start, let me show you what that does. So let me just get rid of those. So basically, if we take something like a cube, and I'm just going to subdivide it like twice, and then if you take this cube and you go to object, and then you go to quick effects, self fracture. So you'll see that's where it's going to load where it's going to install the plugin, and it's going to give you all these options. I'm not going to go through all of this, so I'm just going to use own verts and source limit. You can set the number of how many pieces you want, or the maximum amount of pieces. Then also noise, if you leave the noise at 0, it's just going to create like little squares. So if you want to break it up into like different shapes, just set the noise, just increase the noise. I usually set it at 1. And then you can also recursive shatter. So that's basically going to re-shatter the pieces, the first shattered pieces, if that makes any sense. So if I set this to like 2, you can see there it's kind of redoing the extra fracturing. And it's going to create all those tiny little pieces for you. And then when it's done, you can then hide your original cube, and it's going to have all these different pieces that we're going to break out later on. So let's delete all this, and let's delete our cube, and let's start a brand new scene with a brand new cube. So yeah, so that's the reference. So let's start with this. So first I'm just going to move this up, and first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to set my pivot to this bottom face in the center. So I'm going to select this face and then Shift S, cursor to selected, to put my 3D cursor right there at the bottom. Go out of edit mode, right click, set origin to 3D cursor. And now the 3D cursor is there. So if we scale, it's going to scale according to that pivot. So first of all, I'm just going to scale it up, make it a little bigger. Let's just see, maybe like, I don't know, 5 meters by 5 meters. And then how tall are we going to make this? So if I just GZ that. So currently it's 11.4. So maybe let's round it off to like 12 meters. 12 meters tall. And yeah, let's have a look. So yeah, I'm not gonna build this exact thing. I just want something that we can shatter later on. So yeah, let's start by adding some loop cuts. So maybe let's add a little loop cut there, and we can maybe just select all these faces around, and I can extrude that along normals just to kind of create that middle piece right there. I think we must maybe make this a little taller, maybe, or we can always extrude it. I think let's start about there, and then what I'm going to do, I'm going to extrude again, but I'm going to S for scale to scale it out first, just to create that little kind of that under section, and then I will extrude this up so we get something like that. So let's move it up a little more, and now I just want to create these little pointy things at the top. I don't know what you call them. Martin Fenter in the house. So I'm gonna do a little inset here. I wonder I'm gonna do this, and then maybe just extrude that in. It's weird, always when I'm doing a live stream and I'm busy modeling it, I can't like think how to model basic stuff. It's like pressure, the live stream pressure. So now we'll probably just need to create a few loop cuts here, or subdivide these things. I wonder if I can first dissolve these ones, dissolve these edges, and then this will be one big face. Oh yeah, we can't dissolve these, eh? Yeah, let's undo that. Dunk, dunk, dunk. Okay, so let's see if we can just create some loop cuts. Loop cuts. So maybe one here, maybe one this side, and maybe let's do like an angled one there, angled one here, same here, same here. Okay, so this is going to be a little different than our reference, but it's fine. So I'm just going to select kind of every second one of these, and then we just extrude them up so we have something like that. So yeah, they're a bit different, but I think it looks pretty cool that they're not all perfectly flat. So that's our little tower. I add a few more details, but nothing crazy. Maybe like at the bottom we can do a loop cut around here, and then select all of these, all of these faces, and then we can extrude them along normals. So that's Alt E, extrude along normals, and maybe just like a little base like that. And then I want to select all of those edges around and then just push them down. So GZ, maybe not, maybe just like this. We can maybe just straighten out these sides. So to do that, you just select all of these faces, and then I want to scale them in the x-axis, so SX and then 0. Same with this side, so SX 0. This side will be Y, so SY 0, just to straighten those. And then the same on this side, SY 0. So it will just straighten that out. And maybe, I'm not going to do the window. Maybe let's just do another loop cut here around the base of this thing. And then maybe let's do a little extrude around here, maybe something like so. Well, I want to undo that, and instead of along normals, I just want to do extrude individual faces, and then I want to scale them down. Let's see how that looks. So I'm going to change my what is this, the pivot, transform pivot point here at the top. I'm going to set this to individual origins, and then we'll get something like that. No idea what that is, but it kinda looks cool. And these, yeah, I'm not gonna create these weird side things. I don't think they look that nice. Another thing, when it comes to when you're using self fracture, I am not sure how to do your textures, because obviously if you build your object, like your full object, and you're gonna UV unwrap it and then you fracture it afterwards, I've no idea what's gonna happen to those UV maps, because obviously it's gonna like slice this object up into, like, say 100 or 200 pieces. Hey Niku, yeah, it's time for some loop cuts. Yeah, so I'm just talking about the UVs and when you're using self fracture. So self fracture will break your object into many different pieces, and I'm not sure how that works with when you have textures on your main object. If it's going to create like individual UV maps for each, I don't know, for each different object, I have no idea. But I don't think I'm going to texture this one tonight. Let's just focus on the physics. Physics. Let's give it a name. This cube, I'm just going to call it tower. And then we do a save. Okay, so very basic little tower. And we can maybe add some more details here in the center. Or maybe let's select all of these ones. And then let's do an inset for a change. Maybe, yeah, maybe like a double I, so inset twice. And then we're going to pull this inwards. So Alt E and then faces along normals. And then we're going to go inwards. Just slightly like so. I wonder if we must do maybe something around this area as well. Yeah, let's create like a little edge here. And you know what I didn't do? Let's just apply the scale quickly, because I think my insets are a bit weird. So now if we do along normals, yeah, it should probably be better. And then I just want to straighten these out again. So I'm going to select all of those faces and then SX0 to scale them in the x-axis to make them flat. Same with this side, SX0, and then this side will be the y-axis, so SY0, and this side will be y as well, SY0. Okay, cool. So I think let's break it up and see what we can do. So first of all, I'm going to create a floor. So Shift A mesh, and I'm just going to create a plane, and we call this our floor. Floor. And yeah, have any of you guys used physics in Blender before? Let me know if you have played around with it. I just want to make a few loop cuts here just so that it breaks a bit more interesting. So I'm gonna just kind of loop cut around there, loop cut there, and maybe let's do loop cut, so they kind of just break into smaller pieces. Control R, Control R, Control R, Control R, Control R. Okay, so I think we have more than enough faces to break this up into many different pieces. Hey Chase, hey Duxshina, sorry if I am mispronouncing your name. Welcome to the stream. Thanks for watching. Okay, so I'm gonna just save this quickly, and let's see what we can do with this little tower. So with the tower selected, make sure that you apply the scale. You always need to apply that scale when doing anything in Blender. So really important, apply the scale. So if you look at your scale, it's 111. So that is all good, and we're ready to fracture. Right. So with your object selected, as I mentioned before, make sure you have the Cell Fracture plugin installed or add-on. Just go to your add-ons and just search Cell, C-E-L-L. It's going to come up, add it. And now if you go to Object and you go to Quick Effects, you'll see Cell Fracture here at the bottom. And this is where the magic is going to happen. Whoops, what did I do now? Cell Fracture. Okay, cool. So first of all, I'm going to set it to own verts. So it's going to use the vertices of this object. You can do all kinds of different things. You can use the annotation pencil. You can use a child object to kind of break it up according to the vertices of that object, but I'm not going to do that. And then you can set your source limit, which is the limit of pieces that you want. So I think let's increase this to about 500. And then, as I mentioned before, noise. If you leave your noise at 0, it's going to kind of break it up into little squares, all nice, perfect squares, and we don't want that. We want irregular pieces. So increase the noise. I usually just put it on like 1. That's the maximum amount of noise. And then below that, you've got your recursive shatter. So that means it's first gonna break your model into different pieces, and then it's gonna break them into smaller pieces. It's gonna kind of do like a second shatter, and you can increase this if you want to do maybe 3 shatters after that. And it's not going to do it with every piece. You can set the randomization here at the bottom, this rando. It's on 0.25, so it means like a quarter of, I think it's a quarter, yeah, quarter. So a quarter of all the objects will be shattered again. And then 25% of that will shatter again, and that will happen 3 times. So, small, random, big. I'm going to set this to random. This is the size of this recursive. Okay, so let's just keep it at random, see what that does. And then you can also add it to or you can add all the little pieces to a new collection. So that's always nice to do. So I'm gonna just type in frac for fracture. So it's gonna create a new collection. It's gonna put all these pieces into that collection. So let us see what happens. So that's cool. Here we go. Cool. So you can see it's starting to like kind of break it apart. And it's running through the first pass, and then it's gonna break it into more pieces. Cool. All done. So now I'm just going to close this reference. I'll just close it down. I don't think we need that. So I'm just going to what are we doing here? Right click, swap areas. No, I don't want to swap areas. I actually want to close this area. Right click, join areas. There we go. So as you can see, that's the collection that it created, that frac. And underneath this collection, we've got all these little pieces. Let's see how many we have. Page down, page down. So we have 305 pieces that we're going to work with. So I'm going to just take my original tower, because it's going to keep a copy of your original mesh. And then I'm just going to move out of the way. So I'm just going to move it along the x-axis, and then we can just hide it so it's out of view. So yeah, as you can see, it's broken it up into nice little smaller pieces, and I can now take any of these pieces and I can kind of just move them out. But we're not going to do that. So first of all, what I'm going to do, I'm going to select my floor, and I'm going to go to my what is this? Physics properties. And then I'm going to set the floor to a rigid body. And instead of active, because if I leave it on active and I play, let me just save this, because you must always save when you're working with physics, because it can be a bit unstable. So yeah, just save. So if I set the floor as an active rigid body and I press play, you'll see that my floor is going to fall. And we don't want that. So we want the floor as a passive object. So if I play it now, you'll see it's going to stay. So it's a rigid body, but it's passive. So next up, I'm just going to set the floor so I can't select it. So to do that, here in this little filter here, just above the outliner, this arrow, if you click that, that's selectable. And now I can just disable select on the floor, and that means I can't select the floor, which is nice because sometimes you don't want to select something accidentally. So now I can select all of these pieces and make sure you select all of them. And now I want to add this rigid body rigid body properties to each and every little object. So we're going to go to object and we're going to go to rigid body, and with everything selected, click on add active. And what that's going to do, if you select one of them, you'll see under the physics properties, you'll see that it's got the active rigid body there. And if we play this back, let me just save it now, so it's all default settings. Play this back, you'll see that our tower will start to crumble and fall apart. Okay, but that's not what we want. So first of all, what we're going to do is we're first going to select all of these pieces again. So I'm just going to right click on this collection and I'm going to choose select objects. So we've got all those objects selected. And yeah, let me just show you quickly if you haven't used physics in Blender before. If you select your object and you go to your physics properties, you'll see that you have a mass. So this is set to 1 kilogram. And if I click on a smaller one, like that little piece, it's also 1 kilogram. So they're all 1 kilogram, and that's not really realistic because they are different sizes. So what we want to do is we want to calculate each piece or the mass of each piece. So I'm going to select all of them. So right click on the collection, select objects, and then we're going to go to object, then rigid body, and then you'll see there's a calculate mass option right there. And then it's going to give you all these presets like stone, steel, silver, rubber, plastic, iron, all of these things. And I'm just going to go with something like concrete. So there you can see concrete. And it's going to basically calculate the mass by using the volume of that object, the size basically. So if you click that, it's going to load a bit, I think, maybe not. Is it done? Yeah, so now you can see they are pretty massive and pretty heavy. So this piece is 20,013 kilograms. This smaller piece right here, 222. This big one, 7,000. Yeah, so that looks pretty nice. So 4,700. Yeah, so they all have different properties or different mass properties now. I'm just going to save and let's do a quick preview and see what it does. So you can see they kind of break a little bit different now because of the mass, and they'll interact a little different as well. So there are a lot of settings that you can change here. So first up is the shape of your object, and you have different options here like box, sphere, capsule, cylinder, cone, convex hull, mesh, and compound parent. So currently they're all set to convex hull, which is probably the best. Mesh is the most accurate, but it can be very slow because then it will actually use the shape of that mesh. But convex hull is basically, if you think of the way they describe this, quite nice. Let's see here. A mesh-like surface encompassing shrink wrap over all vertices. So it's basically like taking shrink wrap and putting it over the object and then shrinking it, and then that's the shape. But if there's any like indents or like a little hole in the shape, it's not gonna calculate that. It's only gonna calculate kind of the outside shape of the object, if that even makes sense. But yeah, it's accurate. It's okay. It's not as accurate as mesh, but it's a lot faster to calculate than mesh. Yeah, so that's that. And then you have your surface response, and that's also on each and every piece. So here you have the friction and you have the bounciness. So let me show you guys quickly here. If I change, let's increase the bounciness to like, I don't know, 0.8. So now this is only on this one object. So if I play this back, you'll see that one piece right there might bounce a bit. This one, not really. Let's increase it to like 5. Let's see if it's gonna bounce. Not really. Maybe if we increase it to like maybe like 50. I don't even know what the maximum number can be. Yeah, you can see it's definitely bouncing a bit more. Slightly more. So what you can also do is you can go to your rigid body world settings, which is basically the settings of the default settings of your whole world. So that's under this little icon. And if you go to rigid body world, you'll see you've got your speed and you've got your sub-steps per frame and solver iterations. So that's basically how many calculations per frame. So this one is it's set to 10. So it's gonna do 10 calculations per frame. And if we go to, let me just see here, this is the cache, we're not interested in that. And this is the field widgets, also not interested in that. Gravity, that's all fine. Yeah, I was probably thinking of something else. What you can also do is you can select your floor. So let me just enable the floor select again. And then if you go to your physics settings, you can set the bounciness of the floor as well. So let's increase the floor to like 50 or something crazy. Save. Play that back. Let's see what happens. I think because they're so heavy, they don't bounce. Maybe if we increase this to like, I don't know, like 1,000. Maybe 10,000. Physics is always about playing around with these numbers. But yeah, anyways, I don't really want any bounciness. I was just wanting to show it to you guys. But yeah, I think because we're working with really big numbers with the weight settings, it's a little different. But I think for now it should just stay on 0. So let's say you change one of these properties and you want to kind of apply that to all the objects in your scene. You do your settings, so you change it. So we'll set the friction to 0.5 and the bounciness to 0. And then what you have to do is you need to select all the objects. So I'm going to right click on fracture and say select objects. And then you can right click on this property and then you say copy to selected. And same with bounciness, copy to selected. So now if we select all of these pieces, they should all be on 0. I think that was the default value. So let's just test it quickly. If I increase maybe this one here on the side, if I increase this to 0.256, select all the others, right click on this, copy to selected. Now if we select, yeah, as you can see, they're all now 0.256. So I want to set it to 0. Select them all again, right click, copy to selected, and now they all should be back to 0. Cool, so that's the easy part when it comes to collisions, because now it's just falling. Every time I play it, it's just going to kind of fall. It's not really interesting. So what we want to do is we want to create a constraint between all of these pieces. Hey Davinder Deep Singh, how you doing, man? Thanks for the subscription. Thanks so much. So yeah, so what I want to do is I want to add constraints between all of these little pieces so that they don't just break or fall apart. It's almost going to act like a bit of glue. Yeah, so it's going to act like glue between these pieces, and then you can kind of change how much force they require to break apart. So yeah, that's the idea. So first of all, I'm going to set my floor back to unselectable, so we can't select that. And then I'm going to select all my pieces. So right click on the collection, select objects, like so. And then we're going to go to object again, rigid body. And this time we're going to use this connect right here at the bottom. So if you hover over that, it says create a rigid body constraint between the selected rigid bodies. So that's exactly what we want to do. Connect, and it's going to load for a bit. And there we go. Once it's done, you'll see all these funky little empties. So if I click on one of them, it's going to create these axes empties, and it's going to link them to like each individual little fracture. And then these constraints, you can see in the outliner, they each have their own properties. So if I scroll down here, you'll see we have 266 of them. Not sure why it's a different number than the pieces, but anyways. So I'm going to select all of them, and I want to drop them into their own collection. So just hover here in the viewport and press M for Mary, and then you go to new collection, and let's just call them constraints, like so. And now they're all in their own little collection, like so. And now if we play this will probably freak out, so let me just save that. Let's give it a play, and you'll see it's kind of wiggling. I don't know if you guys can see this. Let me just put the camera there. You can kind of see some of these smaller objects wiggling around, and you can see the tower is kind of moving, but it's, yeah, and some pieces are going haywire. One piece flying around there. So something's happening, but not exactly what we want. So if we select one of these constraints, and then we have to go to the constraint properties, which is, it's also actually under the physics properties, because it's adding a rigid body constraint, which is in the same area as where you can see the rigid body properties. So let's just select this first one, the constraint, and you can see type is fixed. You get all these different types of constraint: motor, generic spring, piston constraint, slider, hinge, all of this. But we are just going to use the fixed constraint to basically just glue them together. And then we want to, you'll see by default, disable collisions is turned on, which means it's going to disable the collision for these pieces, and we don't want that. We want them to collide with each other, and we want them to collide with the floor as well. So we want to disable or enable collisions, so untick disable collisions. And then breakable, we want these constraints to be breakable. So currently they're just gluing together and they don't want to break, so we want to be able to break them. So we want to enable breakable. And then we've got a threshold, which is currently set to 10. So that's the force amount that it needs to break that constraint. Niku saying he's getting some loop cut withdrawal symptoms. Yeah, I know, we all do get those from time to time. So, alright, so we're going to disable or untick disable collisions, enable breakable, and now I want to copy this setting that I changed to all these other constraints. So we've done that. I'm going to right click on constraints, select all of them, and then first I want to copy that first setting. So unfortunately I think you have to do it per setting. You can't just say copy all the settings. So I'm going to right click on this disable collisions and say copy to selected, and then I'm going to do the same with breakable. So right click on breakable, copy to selected, and for now I'm going to leave the threshold on 10. Let's see what that does. So let's save again to be safe, and let's play and see what happens. So you can see it's working. Some pieces are doing weird stuff and some pieces are falling. Let me just play that again. You see those small pieces at the top, they kind of just go dun, 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 crazy, and I think I know what the problem is here. Like if we click on these objects, I think their pivot points are maybe a little weird. And their pivots are fine. Huh. Okay. Let's select one of these constraints again. And I want to increase this threshold, this breakable threshold. Now, I'm just a little bit worried about those high numbers for the mass that we calculated because of the size. But anyways, I think it might be fine. So I think if we just increase this threshold to like 100, and then we apply that again to all these other constraints. So select all your constraints, right click on this 100 threshold, and then select copy to selected. So if we just choose look at some of the different constraints, they're all set to 100. So that's good. Let's try it again, play, and you can see they just fall apart. So obviously that means 100 is not enough to kind of stop them from breaking. So let's increase this to 5,000. And I'm going to select all the constraints again. That's the one thing, when it comes to physics, there's no real quick and easy way. It's kind of experimenting with the mass and the forces. So it's always like back and forth. Always save, always make backups of your objects when you're breaking them. Yeah. So let me just see what's happening. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna select all these constraints, right click on this threshold, and then copy to selected. So now if we look at these other ones, they're all 5,000. Let's try and do a playback. Okay, now you can see it's not breaking. There's a few funny things happening here. Some of these things are flying around. There's small pieces. Now I know sometimes when it does this, you can go to your rigid body world settings under this triangle or little cone and little sphere, and under rigid body world we can do some things here. So we can increase the sub steps per frame. So that's the amount of calculations per frame. So currently it's 10 calculations per frame. So I'm going to increase this to, let's do like 60. Might be a little bit too much. Obviously that's going to slow things down because it's doing like 6 times the amount of calculations. And now, let me just see, it's very slow now. You can see those pieces are not going crazy. So that's maybe one fix, but it slows everything down quite a bit. So I'm going to set it back to 10. And then the solver iterations. Let me just read this quickly. So that is the number of constraint solver iterations made per step. Wow, okay. So, yeah, so that's like per calculation. So let's increase this to like 20 and play that back. You can see the small pieces are still flying around. So let's increase it to maybe 60, playback, and you can see those pieces are still dancing a bit. So I'm going to increase the steps. Let's just double this to 20. And yeah, that's a bit better. And I'm going to bring this one down to like also 20 maybe. Okay, I'm not going to worry too much about this little piece, because if I increase this too much, it won't move, but it's going to just be too slow to kind of work with. All right, so let's add a second object. Another thing that we can try, let's just increase the constraint forces or this threshold maybe to like 10,000. Let's double it up. So I'm going to select my first constraint and then threshold, increase that to 10,000. And then we're going to select all the constraints. So right click on your collection, select objects, and then we're going to right click on this 10,000 threshold and copy to selected. Alright, so now each of these ones has got a breakable threshold of 10,000. Playback, and everything's stable. Few little pieces again kind of floating around here, but yeah, that's probably just that iterations or the steps per frame. Not gonna worry too much about it, because you can always, like, once you're happy with the basic break or the simulation how it looks, then you can always go back and you can increase those steps, and you can kind of say, okay, cool, I'm going to increase it to like the maximum amount, and then you can let it like simulate overnight, or you can let it run for like an hour, so you don't have to kind of work while it's slow, if that makes any sense. So yeah, so let's create a cube, or let's create like a sphere object, and this sphere will be the object that's going to break the tower. So maybe let's increase it a little, and then always apply your scale because we changed the scale. So object apply scale. Okay, and then I'm going to add a rigid body to this sphere as well. And I'm going to just increase the mass. Let's see what it calculates it as. So if I select this, usually I just type in like a mass here. You can just say, okay, this is like 500 kilograms or whatever. But I want Blender to calculate it according to the volume. So with your sphere selected, go to Object and go to Rigid Body, and then go to Calculate Mass, and we'll do concrete as well. And there you can see 39,884 kilograms. That's 39 tons. Okay, so that's a bit of a heavy sphere, so I think it's good. So what I'm going to do on frame 1, with the sphere selected, I'm going to create a keyframe for its location. So just press I to insert keyframe. And then I'm going to choose location, because I only want to set a keyframe for the location. I'm not worrying about rotation or scale. And then I'm going to go to like frame 40, and I'm going to move it over like through this tower, and I'm going to place it around here. Whoops. GX, place it around there. Why is that not liking that? Huh. Why is this snapping back? Just see. That's very weird. Oh, okay. So you know what? So because I added a rigid body to this sphere, it doesn't like me to add keyframes, because if I play this back, you'll see it's actually going to fall to the ground. So what I need to do on this sphere, I need to tell it that I'm going to animate it. So you'll see under dynamic, or under the mass, you'll see animated. So we just need to tick that. And then I can go to frame 40, and then I can move it across There we go. And now I want to create a keyframe right there. So with the sphere selected, press I, and then we want to create a location keyframe. So now if we scrub through here, you'll see that's gonna move. So let's play this back, see what happens. Nice. So you can see our tower is exploding. So what I want to do, I actually just wanted to move through the one corner almost. So I'm going to delete both these keyframes. Oh, whoops, I don't want to delete the actual sphere. Just the keyframes. And I'm going to look at this from the top. And I want to move this to kind of this area. Create a keyframe for location. And then maybe frame 50, I wanted to move just kind of touching the corner. So maybe to around here. And then I location. Let's see if it's going to miss it. Yeah, it's going to miss it. So what we can do, oops, let's just look at it from the top again. So on the first keyframe, I'm just going to bring the sphere down slightly to about here. And then we just need to update that keyframe. So I and then location. And then on frame 50, I might just bring that one down as well. So GY, bring it down to about here. And then update the keyframe. So I location. And then let's play it back from frame 1. So let's put the camera maybe kind of this view. Let's see what happens. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Let's see, is this gonna fall? Why is that not falling? So I'm going to try and I want to hide all these lines. So you can go to your viewport overlays and you can switch off relationship lines. So that will hide them. And we have some objects that's floating in midair. Interesting. Let me just see deform. And okay. So I think we need to decrease the break threshold. 10,000 might be a little bit too much. So I'm going to bring this down to like maybe 7,000. 7,000, and let's select all the constraints and then right click copy to selected. So all of them are now set to 7,000, and let's play it back from the top. I can probably keyframe the constraints so they switch off after the sphere has gone through. So that's a bit of cheating, but I think it's fine. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to like frame, probably around frame 30, and then I will disable all the constraints. This is going to be interesting to set a keyframe on multiple constraints. Let's see how that's going to work. So what we need to do, I wonder, you can probably copy keyframes from one object to the other. I haven't done that before, but let's see. So frame 30, yeah. So on frame 29, we can take this constraint, and I'm going to set a keyframe on the enabled so that that constraint is enabled. So just click there and you'll see it's going to create a keyframe. And then I'm going to go to frame 30, one frame later, and then I'm going to disable this constraint. So I'm going to deselect it, and then I'm going to create a keyframe. So if I go to frame 29, you'll see enabled is on, and if I go to the next frame, you'll see enabled is off. But now that's only for the one constraint, just the main one. So I need to figure out how we can copy this animation. Set action. Okay, let's first see if this is gonna make any difference. So let's just play this back again. I'm gonna set this iterations back to 10, and also the sub steps. We can always increase it later once we're happy with the way the simulation works. So let's play that back. That's looking pretty cool. Okay, so yeah, so obviously it only disabled that now for the one constraint. So let's see how we can copy. Does anyone know in the chat how to copy keyframes from one object to multiple objects? Because I'm sure you can like select them here at the bottom, and I can go copy, and then I can click on a second one and then paste. No F curve to paste into. But I just want to copy these two constraint keyframes. Insert keyframe, copy. Let's maybe go to frame 29, yeah. So copy them like so, and then constraint 1, right click, paste. No selected F curves to paste. Just go back to the constraint and try and paste it like this. Nope. So here you can also override your iterations. I see that you can do the iterations per constraint, but yeah, that's also not something we want to do. RTFM, read the effing manual. Come on, Niku, go read the manual for us quickly. I'll wait, and you can go and figure it out for me. Okay, it can't be this difficult. I think, what if we copy this animation? Oh, we can't. Paste data blocks. Unlink action. Set action. Let's try and set an action. No, I also don't want to do that. Okay, let's do this. We've got the keyframe right there, so I'm gonna right click on this, select all of these constraints, and you see now we have these two keyframes. Why do we? Oh, because our sphere is probably in here as well. The sphere must come out, yeah. So we've got the sphere in the same collection, so we must just move the sphere out of this collection, so it's on its own. And now let's select this top one again, and then we have the keyframe right there. So I'm gonna right click, select objects. So now we have all the constraints selected, and wonder if I can right click on this keyframe. Also not. Well, I think with all of them selected, I'm gonna just add a keyframe again, and then go to the second one, and then do a keyframe again. That's probably not gonna work. No, it's not gonna work. Okay, if anyone has any ideas how to copy keyframes from one constraint to the other, I can probably go and Google it quickly. Should we do that? Let's see what Google says. Okay, so let's say Blender copy keyframes from one object to another. Yeah, it's not really an object because it's a constraint. Copy animation. To copy an animation from one object to another, select the object you want to animate, then select the object you want to copy the animation from, and then press Ctrl L and choose animation data. Okay, so you first select all the objects, and then Niku, what do you have there? Copy constraints to selected. Just select all bones objects that you want to give a copy of the constraint, and then select the bones containing the constraint. Yeah, so you first select all the constraints without the animation, then last you select the constraint with the animation, and then you do I think it's Control L, Shift Control, and then select object constraint from the pop-up menu. The idea behind this is to copy the constraints of the active objects to the selected. Yeah, I think that only copies the constraints. I might be wrong. I'm going to try this quickly, this animation data thing. So first we select all the objects without the animation, then last with that, and then Control L. So I'm going to select all of these things, deselect select all of them, and then Control click, Shift click, no. So we want to select all of these ones first, and then we want to select the one with the keyframes last. Control click, and then Control L, and then we select animation data. So make links, animation data. Yes, I think it worked. So you can see the keyframes here at the bottom, and if I select all of them, you'll see we have keyframes on them. Yes, okay, so that worked. Awesome. Thanks for your help as well, Niku. Okay, so let's go back, let's save. So now on frame 29, the constraints will still be active, and then frame 30, all the constraints will be disabled. And then it should just fall apart. So let's see what happens. Save and play. Yeah, that kinda worked. And you can see the pieces are obviously falling off this plane as well. There they go. And then it's gonna start again. So I think that's looking pretty cool. I'm gonna still play around with this. I actually only started using constraints like in the last week. I've done like a lot of physics simulations, but I've never used constraints, and that's obviously one thing that can make your physics simulations very interesting, because you can glue different pieces together, or you can create like a hinge constraint on the one, so it kind of, if it hits the one object, the other one will kind of swing, and it will use the other one as a hinge, or a different object as a hinge. So you can do very interesting stuff with constraints. So, oh shit, sorry. I think you should be back in Blender now. Always need to remember to change back. Just give it a couple of seconds to update. Okay, so yeah, sorry about that. So now I can see all of these constraints. If I select them, they all have the keyframes here at the bottom. So all of them, it's got the keyframes on 29 and then 30. And then if you play this back, you'll see that's going to smash through it, and then all the pieces are falling to the ground. So maybe let's add one more, so it kind of comes from this side. See how that looks. So I'm going to create another UV sphere, and I'm going to scale it up, and I'm going to move it this way, and then I'm going to move it up, and I want this one to hit just off. I'm just going to increase, or I'm just going to drag this one keyframe, this ending keyframe, to maybe frame 60, like so. Whoops. Okay, so let's play that back. So first one hits, second one hits. Yeah, that's cool. That's what I wanted. Okay, so now what I want to do is I'm going to increase those steps. And I'm also going to increase the iteration number and all of that. And then let's let it run through and see if we get a better quality simulation. So I'm going to go to this rigid body world again. And I'm going to increase the sub steps per frame from 10 to maybe let's make it like 30. So it's 3 times the calculations. And then I'm going to increase the solver iterations to 30 as well. So it's kind of, it should give us like 3 times the quality or the stability in the simulation. Save and play. So as you can see, it's a lot slower now. It's still not too bad. Let's just cache through. So basically it's caching the simulation here. At the bottom you can see this little yellow orange line, and I think that means it's caching it. So let's see. And then the second time it should be real time. Yeah, there you go. So that's looking pretty cool. Let's see that again close up. Yeah, so you can go frame by frame. That's looking cool. So as you can see, it's obviously interacting with these objects as well. So you can kind of see they're falling on that. So what you can do is you can, on that sphere, you can say once it hits it, you want to disable its collision. So let's see here. So you can probably keyframe this, or we can keyframe. I wonder if you can keyframe this animation, this type. Probably not, because it doesn't have a little dot next to it. So you can probably animate either dynamic, actively participates. Okay, yeah. So you can animate this. So let's say frame 45. I want it still to be active, the sphere. So I'm going to set a keyframe, and then on frame 46, I want to set this dynamic to off. So this object is not going to be participating in the simulation anymore. And then I'll keyframe that. So let's just simulate again. So these pieces then should not interact with this sphere after frame 46. So let's have a look. Let's have a look and see what happens. Yo! Everyone's still awake. Okay, so there we can see it's gone through, and interestingly, these pieces are still interacting with the sphere. Dynamic is definitely off. Shape, friction, collection, dynamics. Oh, what is this? Deactivation. Okay, so this is, you can start some of your pieces as deactive and then you can activate them later, but that's not really what we want to do. It's weird that that didn't work. Let's just give it another go quickly. I wonder if I must maybe clear the cache. So if you want to clear the cache, go to your rigid body world settings, and then under cache I think we can just clear it here. So you can go delete Delete all bakes. Yeah, I think so. Calculate frame, current cache to bake, update all to frame. So let's just see what it does. No, it looks like they're still interacting. I can probably just animate it away, like literally create a keyframe. So let's just do this. So I'm gonna clear these keyframes, which are those two right here. Delete keyframes, and now it's just gonna stay active, or the dynamic will stay on. But what I can do is I can go and I can say, okay, play back to around here, to let's say frame 40, and we'll put a location keyframe on that sphere. I'm just going to delete this keyframe at frame 60, and then you can say frame 41, we can move it out to like somewhere else, to there, and then just put another keyframe. So it's going to jump from there, frame 40, 41 is going to be all the way there, all the way out to the side. So let's simulate this again and see what happens. It's probably going to explode now because it might calculate the subframe movement of that sphere, but let's see. Yeah, so you see some of the pieces are going crazy because it's calculating the in-between steps as well. So you can see it's kind of, there they go. That looks quite cool. Let's just play that again. Explosion in all different directions. Okay, so that's not going to work. I think if we set the iterations back down, or the steps back down to 10, iterations back down to 10, and we simulate this again. Nah, okay, so that's not going to work. Okay, let's not worry too much about that. I'm going to set this one keyframe at 50. I'm going to delete that keyframe. And this keyframe, let's undo that quickly. So frame 40, I'm going to delete the keyframe on frame 50. And then this one, I'm just going to move it all the way through. And then update that keyframe. Yeah, just like so. Okay, what else can we do? So that's the basic like constraints when it comes to physics simulations. Should we do a quick little render? Let's add a environment texture or an HDRI. I'm just gonna add like an outdoorsy type of vibe. So driving school. Maybe let's add something different. Something like like a kind of desert vibes. Not really desert, but anyways. And then we'll bring this down to like 0.2, and maybe let's add some lights. Let's add light, just a normal point light, and I'm gonna kind of place it somewhere here. Let's increase it to like 500, maybe 5,000. And I want to create some fog so we can see some of the light kind of coming through those pieces. So I'll probably have to move this light inside, because then we'll get like, let me just simulate that again. Yeah, so we'll get kind of that light coming out of the center of the tower, and then we can add some fog maybe just to make it more interesting. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a cube. By the way, guys and girls, if you won't mind clicking on that like button, it really helps the algorithm to show my live streams to other people as well. Just a little click on the like button. Thank you so much. So this is going to be our fog, so I'm just going to make it pretty big, like so. Move it up a bit. Probably don't have to be this tall. So I'm going to just take this face and just drag it down, so maybe around here. So now we can go and we can give this a volumetric material. So really easy. With this cube selected, we're going to go to our material settings, create a new material, let's call it fog. And now we can go to the shader, and you'll see we have a surface and we'll also have a volume section. So we don't want a surface material for the fog because we're going to use volumetrics. So under surface, it's currently set to the principled BSDF shader, so I'm going to remove that. So now we don't have any surface material. And now under volume, we're going to select a volume shader. So principled volume shader right here. So now if we go to render view, you'll see we have some fog, but it's obviously very dense. So we need to change the density. So this density is currently set to 1, so I'm going to bring that down to like 0.1. And there you can see those nice little light rays. Maybe even bring it down more, like 0.1, 0.01, maybe 0.02. And then let's just hide our HDRI. So I'm going to go to the render settings and then under film, transparent. And then that's off. And let's add some color. So I'm going to take our fog. Where did we save the fog? So that's under our... So if we go to material, okay, it's selected. So we can change the color of the fog to maybe like a more like a blue, and maybe let's change the light color as well. So I'm just going to select the light, make it blue as well, or any other color. Yeah, maybe blue for now, like so. And maybe let's increase the strength of that light to make it even brighter, like 20,000. Yes, that's what I want. And then we can add a material maybe to all these little pieces. So let's have a look at the UVs. It should be interesting to see what happened to the UVs of these objects. Oops. So if we have this one object selected, this one, and we select everything, yeah, you can see the UVs are all crazy. Yeah. Okay, so I think let's just add a normal color to this. So I'm gonna hide this box, this fog box. So just hide that away. It's still gonna render it, just not gonna show it in the viewport. And now what we can do is let's click on one of these and add a color. So maybe should we do glass? Glass can be quite intense for the rendering, but maybe let's have a look. So for glass, I'm going to go to surface, and I'm going to change the transmission all the way to 1. So that's the kind of the see-through of that object. And then I'm going to increase or decrease the roughness to 0. And I wonder if the color must be white or black. It doesn't really matter. Oh, sorry, that's subsurface. Base color black. Nah, that's just going to make it black. So I think this should stay white. And let's just go to our render settings and enable ambient occlusion, enable bloom, screen space reflections. We can even enable motion blur, and then what that will do, let me just see, it's only going to show it in the render. So let's add a quick camera. So I'm going to add a camera, and I'm going to sync it to my viewport or my view. So I'm just going to set my view to something like this, and then you can go to view, align active camera to view, and it's going to kind of just snap my camera in there. And if I press N on the keyboard to bring up this menu, and I go to camera to view, I can kind of lock my camera into place, and I can reposition it maybe somewhere like that, unlock it, and then just make this bigger. And let's do a quick render with a motion blur. Yeah, so there you can see the motion blur in action. You can see our old tower here at the back. So I'm just going to switch that off for rendering. So if you don't want to render your hidden objects, go to your filter, click on the little camera, and then under or next to that tower that's hidden, you can see the render button is still active. So you can just disable the render, and that will disable that. So now if we render again, you'll see that our our tower is gone. So maybe let's just apply that glass material to all the other pieces. So easy way to do that. It's very similar to that way that we copied the keyframes. So you first select all your fractures, select objects, and then you want to just deselect this one. Oh, let me just try that again. Select and then shift click on this one. So that's the one with the material that we want to copy. And then we want to select this one last. So you want to shift click it last, and then Control L, and then, whoops, Control L, come on. And then you want to select materials, like so. So now, if we do a little render, so then you get something like that. I think let's try a little quick cycles render and see what we get, because I know with glass and things like that, cycles usually looks a lot better. And then I also want to hide, I don't want to render these two spheres, so I want to hide them, and I also want to make them not render. And this one, where is this one? This one is probably under this one. Yeah. So let's just move this one out and close that collection. Okay, so that's where we also don't want to render that. And let's change it over to cycles. Let's just render, let that run for a second. Okie dokie, I think let's try a quick render and see what it does. So I'm gonna just go back to solid view, cycles, and I am going to set this to adaptive sampling, and then I'm also going to enable denoising for the render. We'll probably just leave it on the default one. And film is set to transparency, that's cool. And let's enable motion blur again, because this is now on cycles, so it works a little different. And then maybe let's add some depth of field to our camera. So camera, what you can do with the depth of field, so if you enable depth of field, you can obviously choose your focus distance or your focus objects just by kind of doing that, or you can set